I move, seconded by the member for Lac du Bonny, therefore be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba recognize the celebration of over 200 years of Polish immigration to Western Canada, the subsequent preservation of Polish language and culture, and the greater enrichment of Manitoban society through the presence of the Polish community.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Kildonan, seconded by the Honourable Member for Lac du Bonny. Therefore, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba recognize the celebration of over 200 years of Polish immigration to Western Canada, the subsequent preservation of Polish language and culture, and the greater enrichment of Manitoban society through the presence of the Polish community. The Honourable Member for Kildonan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my honour to be here, of course, always on behalf of the good people of Kildonan, but of course also this entire legislature, as we can come together and celebrate our diversity and culture. The resolution celebrates the Polish community in Manitoba and how they have contributed significantly to the province's social, economic, political, and cultural fabric. The first Polish people to arrive in Manitoba were the Demiron Regiment, who were with Lord Selkirk in his expedition to the Red River Valley in 1817. For over 200 years, Polish people have been coming to Western Canada. They've been coming to the Red River Valley. They've been arriving to Manitoba, looking for an opportunity for a better life. Today, there are over 85,000 Manitobans of Polish descent and heritage, and this impressive contribution to the Polish community to our greater society is what we come here to celebrate today. Now, Poland gained independence in 1918 by agreement as part of the peace that ended the First World War. But modern Poland was still surrounded by its enemies and defended its new borders through a series of skirmishes and wars that ended with the Polish-Soviet War of 1921. But after that, Polish people from around the world were joyous as they were able to have a new state and country to call home again. And many returned to their homeland from across the world. Kazimir and Angela Curry returned to Poland from the United States with their son Karl as the peace settled into the Polish countryside. In Poland, their family would grow with the births of Kazimir, Angela, Vladislav, and Wanda. After some years, they traveled to Canada and arrived in Halifax on 25 August 1928. I table a copy of the immigration book that documented their landing here in Canada. Vladislav Curia spent much of his childhood in McCurry, Manitoba. He would go on to serve in the Navy during the Second World War. He met a girl in Prince Edward Island named Jean, and they were married. Along the way, he changed his name to Walter Curry. He is my grandfather, and that man sits in the gallery with us today. I was not raised in a Polish-speaking house, but always we had ample servings of kubasa, rye bread, and pierogies. When we drove up to Birds Hill Park on many family outings, once in a while, Dad would always mention, that's where Pope John Paul II gave Mass in 1984. Someone would say he was Polish like us. I didn't really know what that meant. As the member for Kildonan, I am pleased to represent a diverse community of people from across the world. People who have come to Manitoba looking for a better life, or sometimes taking flight from a less precarious situation. But we celebrate our Polish culture as part of our mosaic fabric that makes up not just Winnipeg's North End, not just Winnipeg itself, Manitoba, but Canada truly is a society that values new Canadians who arrive and those that build into our cultural mosaic. We celebrate and enjoy Polish culture all the time. Of course, the Manitoba Social is enjoyed at many a Polish hall across the North End. Again, something that growing up, not recognizing that this coming together of culture had significantly more significant meaning. For when people arrived, they only had their language, their church, and they needed places to meet. And these places still dot our community. It's important to remember, though, that today, when we have events like Polish Fest, we also enjoy other cultures. The Ukrainian choirs and even the Japanese taiko drums joined us at Polish Fest in the past. And I see this as just another example of how the Polish community and culture is weaved, intertwined with our Manitoba fabric. As I grow up, I look past to guidance. As people came to Manitoba, sometimes they were fleeing from terrible circumstances, but they always made their home and their Polish culture a part of their identity. This Polish culture is in the storefronts. As we see it in the names as we pass by in the North End, we see it in every community. They are professionals, they are doctors, they are teachers, they are priests, they are politicians. They are everyone in our society, and all at once we join together to enjoy the fruits of their labor. I must mention, of course, our Church Holy Ghost Parish in the North End, the oldest Polish church in Western Canada. It's a special home for many people, and growing up, playing sports there, I never realized the significance. And now as an adult, of course, it truly is such a magnificent jewel in our North End. I couldn't be more happy to spend as much time as possible there. Of course, we have our Polish community and our organizations. I'd be remiss to not mention the Polish Canadian Congress, essentially founded here in Manitoba, something that has grown over the many years. We're joined today by Grażyna Gale-Sowski, the President of the Polish Canadian Congress. We also have we have many other groups, such as Polish Gymnastic Association Sokol, again joined by its members. Sokol Hall on Manitoba Ave has been home to many gatherings, whether it be wedding receptions, baby showers, sometimes even funeral receptions, but the community gets together and they join in their friendship and their culture and their family, rejoicing in their language and shared identity. There's also the Polish Combatants Association. I think something that many of us forget, that at the end of the Second World War, Poland again felt the iron grip of occupation, and many Polish people decided not to return home. These veterans of the Second World War and veterans of worse situations of imprisonment in the Soviet Union formed an association that is thriving today. Of course, many of us, when we go to Folklorama, sometimes our only connection to these cultures, we see the SPK Iskry dance group that must be mentioned, that started by Henry Laurence, one of the founding leaders of the Folklorama movement. When we celebrate culture in Manitoba, we celebrate our various mosaics that bring us together. I was a Polish man who was one of the founders of the idea of Folklorama. Again, our culture is interwoven with Polish culture as we journey along. I also would be very happy to mention our wonderful museums that contain and experience the Polish culture, like Ogniwo Polish Museum on Main Street, which has incredible archives. When I brought my grandfather there to take a look and he gave his oral history, there's a wall of suitcases that is at the entrance. There's suitcases donated by people who came to Canada from Poland, and he pointed right in the middle and said, "That's like the one we had." And right away that connection happens again. Through my grandfather, through his experience being born in Poland, raising my family and myself, not necessarily in a Polish household, but that connections and those mosaic weaves together again. Of course, we also have the Cooks Creek Heritage Museum near St. Michael's Church that preserves much of our Polish and Eastern European culture. As people were finding a new life on the harsh prairies, they were finding themselves with community. Through church, we have this. I couldn't be more happy, of course, that Manitoba has special significance in military history with Andrew Mynarski, flight officer, who was awarded the Victoria Cross posthumously. He was part of the number 419 Moose Squadron, and aboard a Lancaster bomber, as many people have seen the Canada Heritage Moments, he tried to save his friend who was in a burning aircraft. He could not, and the burns that he sustained would go on to kill him. He died, but his friend lived somehow. He survived the war, and he told the story of Flight Officer Andrew Mynarski. Today, we commemorate that name with school, through our politics, but it is of note that Andrew Mynarski was the only Manitoban-born recipient of the Victoria Cross during the Second World War, and the only Polish-Canadian recipient of the Victoria Cross. He grew up not very far from where I live now. He grew up very close to what I like to consider the heart of our diversity in Manitoba. Winnipeg's North End has always been a place where different peoples, down the street from St. John Cantius Fraternal Aid Society building is an Ethiopian church. The fabric is woven in together. As we share in our culture, we can always remember that the cultures are ones that we can celebrate with acts like this. This resolution calls forward for us to celebrate our differences, not as things to divide us, but things that we can bring together, that we can share in our different foods, our music, our culture, our singing, our languages, and that we're better when we share more of those things, that we're better when we can share at the church, whether it's celebrating the 100th anniversary of Polish independence that we did with many of my colleagues. I was proud to be joined by the Minister of Infrastructure, Minister for Sport, Culture, Heritage, the member for Southdale, the Mayor of Winnipeg, members from federal government, and standing room only attendance of members of our Polish community who celebrated 100 years of a modern state of Poland in the heart of Garden City. If it was a nicer night out, I would have walked to the event, but it's something where I consider it's a part of our community. It's woven, intertwined, and that the same facility will house various different student groups as they sing their Christmas carols. But I know for certain that with 100 years of the modern state of Poland celebrated this year, it is the perfect opportunity for us in this Manitoba Legislature to call together and say that we celebrate our Polish heritage, we stand with our Polish friends, our family, the people around us. And like myself, some have changed their names. You may not even know that someone who you've known for years is of Polish heritage. Just as I do not know the language, but I do know that I'm proud to be of Polish heritage. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.